Los Angeles, I'm and most Hollywood nights. She goes to California, oh, California.
What you say about Los Angeles?
LA got the people saying.
You're listening to Corner of the Galaxy on cornerofthegalaxy.com. It's time for another episode of Corner of the Galaxy from the Box, the show that gets you behind the scenes of the LA Galaxy and into the minds of soccer reporters and MLS experts. Your hosts for the day are Corner of the Galaxy's Josh Guesman and LA Times soccer reporter Kevin Baxter. Let's start the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Corner of the Galaxy from the Box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. I'm your host, Josh Guesman, coming to you on 30 p.m. Going to get you through basically any updates that have happened since our show on Thursday. Not a lot, but some breaking news that we have and can share with you. So we're going to talk about that and get reacquainted with one of our favorite co-hosts, Mr. Kevin Baxter. So let's get on with the show. Kev, how you doing? If you're on our live stream, it seems that for whatever reason the internet doesn't want to cooperate with us. And if that's the case, then we are just going to go ahead and just do a show. We'll record it, and that way we'll make sure that we put out a podcast. And
it's unfortunate because the people that usually view us would have been able to perhaps see you live on the air tonight.
I mean, the one good thing about the whole delay is that it gave a chance for my cough to calm down again. So yes, we dodged a bullet.
Back.
Yeah, we dodged a bullet. I think we're okay. But I'm sure people are already complaining that it's not working and all that stuff. So we'll do our best to sort of get through it. Did you have better luck in New Zealand?
I think I've been to 36 countries now for reporting stuff, which I'm very fortunate to be able to do that. But of those 36 countries, the one that I would move to in a heartbeat, I would move to Auckland tomorrow if I had to. The U.S., for example, they had their schedule pretty much picked out. Everyone thought they'd win the group. They'd go play their first round of 16 game in Wellington, and then they'd wind up in Sydney eventually. With so many upsets, all that changed, and people were flying to different cities. Air New Zealand immediately at the end of the round, at the end of the group, it was amazing. One of the things on the way back that was really interesting is a couple of kids were sitting next to me, and their parents were at another part of the plane. And they were obviously coming back from the World Cup, and the girl sitting next to me on the, the video thing that you can, watch movies and TV on the plane. She started watching the HBO documentary series, Watch Me. And I was right here in the corner of the Galaxy's Valencia home office,
right,
where I'd recorded that interview. And she's watching me, and I'm sitting right next to her, and she has no idea that she should have thought that watching somebody watch me.
That is funny. That's always one of those surreal moments. It's like, oh, I'm going to be on the TV here in a second. That's fun. Well, very good. Well, we're glad to have you back. The LA Galaxy have been taking a break basically since you left. Lost 2 League Cup games.
Two weeks ago, and I need to update something I said, which was, I still stand by it, that the break did not do the Galaxy any good. I don't think the long players during that break, which they would have added anyways if they had been playing.
Right.
But that 3 weeks gave those guys a chance to get a little bit acclimated, not game action. They didn't play in a game, but they got to be at philosophy and style of play. So given that, I think that was a good thing, that 3 week break gave those guys a chance to get to know their teammates. Again, it's not game action, and we'll see how that works against Real Salt Lake. But if there was a silver lining to that 3 week break, I think that probably was it. It gave those guys a chance to get in, get acclimated, and not have to do it in a pressure situation.
Yeah, I mean, hit the nail on the head is that wasn't game action. So that's great. It would have been better had the LA Galaxy been playing in Leagues Cup, and those guys could have been fitting in while playing in games in Leagues Cup. That would have been real game time stuff. Just everything is different in games. We've talked about it many times before. You talk to players about it, and they know it too. It's you play a certain level in training, and yes, it's very high, and people want to say, oh, well, they're professionals. They better not go easy in train. Listen, there's a difference between training and a game. There always is going to be. It's the difference between taking batting practice and facing a real pitcher, right? There's difference in a game. So I'm not super high on the break. I don't think it did them any good. You can spin it however you want, and that they're getting these guys that are coming in and getting some time. But for me, that's really stretching it on this. You wanted the team that had some momentum building, that had some things going to sort of hit this last 12 games. And with
like last year though, in that they virtually remade the team in August with some of the additions. They've kind of done that this year. I don't know if the additions have been quite as dramatic. Maybe the new guy that you're going to talk about in a little bit, maybe that changes things a little bit, but well, for the season now, but they got those guys, added them to win on that streak at the end where they lost one of their last 10 games, made the playoffs. They need a similar streak this time. And I don't know if they set them.
It feels like they created depth. Right. And even by creating depth, by getting some guys like Diego Fagundes as a starter. Right. And so that means it's going to knock somebody else down, whether that's Tyler Boyd or in this particular case, whether it's moving Douglas Costa into the center and having Boyd and Fagundes on the outside wings. Right. That created depth more than anything else. I think Fagundes could be a really impactful player for the LA Galaxy, but they created depth by adding him, right? You look at the other ones like Maya Yoshida. It really, yes, he's probably going to be a starter at center back, but it also created depth because you're able to move Tony Alfaro back. You're able to, slot in Jalen Neal where you want to. So it created depth. And again, we're looking at Tony Alfaro very well could be the last sort of 12 games. I think he's a free agent whenever the season comes up, right? Tyler Boyd has his contract expiring, so that's something to watch in there as well. So you have these little things, but for the most part, it looks like they've set themselves up not just for these 12 games, but for what's going on next and coming up next. To me, there's not a huge, at least it doesn't seem like there's a huge bunch of game changers. There's guys who are going to grow into it, like Edwin Cerrillo. I think he's going to grow into it. I think Michael Barrios which is interesting. You sort of get a winger / guy who's speedy and more direct. And then we should talk about the rumor that's out there. And in fact, we can confirm that it's not just a rumor. Clutch your pearls and hold your purses right now. 37-year-old striker, formerly of Sheffield United in the Championship. He's a quote unquote proven goal scorer, and just the fact that he knows how to score goals at 37. He's a veteran presence. This is a low risk, sort of high reward type thing, which is you're signing him, and from all indications and people I've talked to, this is a 1+1 deal. So he's basically signed for the rest of the season plus a club option for the next year, right? So 1+1. So basically you're renting him for 12 games, and then you get to decide what you want to do with him. And really sort of highlight Dejan Joveljic as the guy who needs to lead them down these last 12 games at striker. We know he's been struggling. I think I even called that's risky to sort of put all your eggs into the Dejan Joveljic basket because he hasn't produced this year. So what you do is you go out and you get a guy who can absolutely be his backup at 37 years old, 37 years young, still younger than you and me by a considerable amount, Kevin. So I don't know why everybody would call him old.
I'm not calling him old. Hey, what do you think with Yoshida and the fact that the midfield now, they have, as you said, depth, but they got like Tyler Boyd and Costa someone might have to play out of position. They have a couple of outside backs that might actually play better as wingers. What do you think of the possibility they might go with a 3-5-2 or even a...
So that's going to be their preferred lineup. You look at somebody like Billy Sharp, who is probably comfortable playing in a two-man striker formation, right? So you can pair him up with Dejan Joveljic. So there's options. That's what I can tell you what Greg Vanney's going to tell. That just gives us another option. It was fairly clear that the experience that he has in the championship and the Premier League and all those other things, because we can actually pull up some of his stats. I mean, the guy has played almost 400 games in the championship, 172 games in League One, 43 Premier League games, some FA Cup and some other things in there. But 691 fairly high level games in football. So he has that experience. It's just a matter of, whether or not the LA Galaxy can really use him and whether or not he can be. I mean, so there's 12 games, Kevin. If he comes in and scores 3 or 4 goals, you got what you kind of needed out of him, didn't you?
Well, the bigger thing is what I'm hearing is they like him in the dressing room as well. Whether he plays a lot or not, whether he makes an impact on the field or not, I don't know if he's going to rise to Sasha Kljestan's status. I mean, Sasha was really. I don't think we really understand the full depth of how impactful he was in the dressing room in that leadership role. And they really don't have anybody like that right now, especially with Chicharito and Brugman both being hurt. And so they need someone who's going to play. I mean, those guys are probably, I would guess they're still around the team, but when you're not playing, your impact lessens a little bit. You're not one of the guys in the trenches. And so if this guy can come in and provide that leadership, whether he makes an impact on the field or not, he could still be still be at 7 points, right, to get back in there. But they have a game in hand against a game or two. I think with Kansas City, they might even have 3 games in hand in the standings. But if Sharp can make those contributions, if they can find a winning formation, something that clicks for them as they did this time last year, I think things are looking a lot better than they maybe were before the Leagues Cup.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, this is a team. And I know there's lots of people. I think you were even asking, well, is Sharp going to be a designated player? He could be. I don't know that it matters. I don't think anybody should be worried about what designation Billy Sharp has for the last 12 games of the season. Telling sort of position where the LA Galaxy are. Having acquired so many people from inside the league, the LA Galaxy were able to sell off an international slot for $125,000. By the way, that's a 12-game rental for Inter Miami, right? So that's sort of telling where the Galaxy are. They've made their interleague moves. They have an excess of international slots because you have Chicharito out, you have Cáceres out, you have Brugman out, right? Maya Yoshida used one of those, right? So those guys, basically, you're like, I have an empty slot here. It's not doing me any good. How about I sell it? And they sold.
And I don't know if they're still contemplating others, but were they able to play in Leagues Cup with an overage of international players? There is an open DP spot because of Chicharito.
Right.
The Galaxy bought out, but I think it does matter going into next season if you're actually going to trust a spot.
Again, why would they not have those 2 spots open?
Because if Billy Sharp is a DP now, he's going to be a DP next season. I mean,
but he has an option, which I doubt they would, right? But I think everybody's very clear in the window right now is that everybody's saying this is a rental. I understand signing a 37-year-old striker, and I'm like, what don't you understand about it is that the Galaxy have had almost no production from. Just going to come in and score 14 goals. I do like the fact they're adding somebody who is going to be clearly motivated to try and score a whole bunch of goals in a very short amount. This is a win-win. There is no downside to making this move because of the short term of the contract. We talked about before the window what the LA Galaxy super short-term guys that are just going to affect you this year but still have you available in that that designated player roles in January, so you have everything still open and available.
In England, so he hasn't played a game in a couple of months. He's going to be fresh. He's not got any injuries to deal with, presumably, but at the same token, in addition to getting to know his new teammates and the style of play here, he can play 7 or 8 by the time he gets game fit.
Well, game fit, and then, we saw Visa Pro to where the LA Galaxy are. Again, Kevin, I think that they made some good moves, but I think they're foundational moves more than anything else, right? These can very clearly make a run, and we've seen them sort of make runs with the last, 12 games anyway. I think that they can absolutely be there, but is going to struggle.
A Real Salt Lake team that played deep into the end of the Leagues Cup as well. So they haven't had nearly they've had enough of a break to get fresh. I think they'll probably have 10 days, right? They were the inability to get anyone that needed an international transfer certificate. They had to get most of their guys in the league. And as you mentioned, Will Kuntz's fingerprints are all over these. Now, whether these were all Greg Vanney ideas and Greg Vanney was the driver behind everything, Will Kuntz made them happen. Or perhaps Will Kuntz add this many players under this kind of a deadline strain with the sanctions and everything else they were under and get it done. And I think they filled a lot of needs. Yes, it's not, they didn't get messed or under. I think Will Kuntz already has proven that he was probably the best signing they made this year.
Yeah. It's very, I think that they run some comparisons on Sharp and I was saying usually on fbref.com, they'll say, well, it's like he's comparable to these 10 players. And one of them, his impact with Nashville and sort of what he does. I think you're looking for something similar with Billy Sharp in that, a guy who knows how to play the number 9 position, certainly in Sharp, and can play in that second forward. I think that's important too. When you talk about somebody who's comfortable in a 2-forward set, to be able to pair with Dejan Joveljic, right? And so if you can get Sharp and Joveljic on there together, if you can get Barrios and Sharp or Barrios and out wide and working their way in, that's fine, and that's different, and that's good to have that different thing, but he can also sort of masquerade as a second forward in there as well. So these moves scream flexibility. You asked about a 3-man back line. Could they put 3 center backs? Absolutely, they have the ability to put 3 center backs. As a wing back, you have the ability for Caligari to play as a wing back. Those guys can play sitting back in terms of a back 4, or they can play out on the wings and run forward. So there's so many different options that Greg Vanney has, and this is one of the so I think having the flexibility within the formation, Sharp gives you that. Again, there's no downside to this. Tell me what the downside is. What Chicharito, they're spending more money to go out there and just get a guy who they're like, he might be able to help us. And if that happens, then that's fine. I would really
right off the bat is he's coming to a team. I'm sure he's looked at the standings. He's looked at the records. He knows what's going on. He's looking at a team at the bottom of the table. With 12 games, he needs to get his mind around the fact that he's playing to win a championship. If they can get hot, they're in the playoffs as the number 19 here with the possibility of taking a bottom of the table team and winning a championship.
Well, it's funny because I think you discount the sort of the championship side of that. Oh, we need to go on a run here to stay up. But not only that, we actually give you a chance, as you just pointed out. We give you a chance at a championship still, even though continue to flicker in and out with internet service. But the chat room pointed out, this is a team that very well, if Vanney doesn't get it in order, if he'd spoon, especially if you look at Miami and what Miami is going to do whenever they come back into the regular all the way through the season, if they have a bad 12 games, Kevin, then what happens at the end? Stay underneath that. So there's a lot of stuff at stake in these last 12 games. But I just don't see the LA Galaxy moving off of where they're at.
We've remade the roster essentially. And you got to give him 3, 4, 5, 6 games to see if he can make that work. And at that point, if you still decide he can't make it work, you're not going to 3 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's 3 years. So there are some decisions they have to make in the offseason. And I think they kind of weigh in heavily of injuries to players that are key that he didn't, we couldn't have foreseen those injuries. I think Greg Vanney's future.
Sharp, like he is the best thing ever in the history. He's not. That's not what the LA Galaxy. The Galaxy aren't getting a guy that they expect to score point, and I think that Sharp will come off the bench to possibly help. But that's sort of that's the position. We'll see when they officially. Although as we've seen, things can turn on a dime. So until it's signed, it's never really done. And so we'll sort of stick by that in terms of how that all goes. But or at least I was assured that the Galaxy were pretty much done. And even Greg Vanney in talking sort of hinted at, listen, we're probably not going to add any more pieces unless somebody is the way that the transfer windows are going over in England and stuff like that. Maybe Billy Sharp thought he had one more chance to play at some other teams. And those fell through, and the LA Galaxy were like, "Hey, well, our offers, a way this played out is that it was one of those you sit there and say, okay, hey Billy, we'd love for you to." Then pretty soon those phone calls didn't get returned in England, and now Billy Sharp's like, "Hey, LA Galaxy, remember whenever you wanted me? Do you still want me?" That type of thing, and they were able to get him.
And you kind of have to look at it through his eyes. Uproot his family. Is he going to leave them there? Does he want to live away from them for several months? It's a 1+1. So he has sort of said, yeah, I can see myself there for 2 seasons if you want me. Your career with a little bit of adventure, which I think I've talked to players that appeals to them. But what's really interesting about all this, when you talk about Fagundes and Yoshida and then Billy Sharp, the Galaxy and duct tape and baling wire. In the past, the Galaxy MO has always been, that's how the Galaxy have traditionally built themselves, sort of the inner Barcelona model down in Miami. That's not the Galaxy right now. It may return. Talking to Neymar and they're talking to Mbappe, that's not true either. Those things aren't really happening anymore. Can they get different reasons? The sanctions, other things. This is where the Galaxy is. It's a change in mind necessarily, but this is a new Galaxy model, and it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. But the days of the Galaxy just going and getting the most, the biggest name, a brand new way of doing business for this franchise.
Yeah, I think it's more intelligent just in terms of there's literally no downside to it. It's okay. We even talked about a veteran player, a guy that they wanted to go out and get, and they got him. Look at Maya Yoshida. Look at Martin Cáceres. Focusing on that, and I think the LA Galaxy even are focusing on that now. But you can't just have all young players. You can't just really long-term tie us down. Go get him, and if he can help us for 12 games, he scores a couple goals, great. If he provides some leadership on top of money they've already spent, right? Chicharito may be out for the season. They have to pay him all his money, whether he's out for the season or not. So they are paying out his $7+ million, and they're going to go out and get somebody like Billy Sharp to come in and sort of quote-unquote replace him. Not so much, it's crazy. So yeah, that's what I think, Kevin. I think that there's flexibility in all this. I think that the field. I think you also have to look at the stuff that's happened off the field. And you and I, who have been privy to, I have talked to so many people over this time about this stuff. That seems to be sorry.
Well, I don't think the front office is actually harmonious at this point. I think there are some I think Will Kuntz now has a lot more influence than maybe we thought he was going to have at the beginning. We talked about how Fagundes is maybe not. It's going to take some manipulation in that midfield. The center back going forward is it going to be a AJ De La Garza and Omar Gonzalez thing, or are we going to have to try to make this to make that work? And when you're bringing in multiple pieces, like all at one time. Remember last year it was happening at once, and it's happening with 12 games to go coming out of this long break. It's different. And it's
interesting sort of times here with the LA Galaxy and what they're trying to do. It's crazy to think. My mind is so this is a results-based game, right? But I almost dismiss the results. Again, and we said it earlier, there's a very good chance the LA Galaxy will be far from safe, but there almost in me seems to be so much confidence, which is crazy because they haven't shown that, but there's so much confidence in what I see and what I've seen from the players. It can't get away from that. I might get t-shirts made up that say the best worst team.
I think you're overselling it a little bit because whether you're talking about a baseball team, catcher, middle infield, center field, that's where your best players are. In soccer, you just go straight up the spine of the team. Strikers World Cups for Uruguay. He's out now. Chicharito played 3 World Cups for Mexico, all-time leading scorer in Mexico. Yes, he was arguably, along with Ricky Puig, the guy that really changed everything last year.
Right.
They've lost those. How are you going to replace those guys?
No, yeah, I mean, it's a problem. And it continues to be a problem. I mean, and watch VAR calls that don't go their way, things that get overturned. Listen, Craig Vanney has noticed that the bad luck has stopped. Not whenever you lose Costa or what he's expected to do for the LA Galaxy, and he's going to have a guy in front of him who doesn't play a lot of defense. I mean, back in the middle, we saw that in the last game that they played. I think they're coming back in the middle, and I think that depends on when he shows up, right? There's a lot of options now. Raheem Edwards is sort of taken over the left back role over Aude, but whenever all of a sudden they didn't have any more center backs, whenever they had nobody really to replace Brugman, whenever he went down, you had, yes, the 3 injuries were big, but I also think that the like for Chicharito, that doesn't happen.
Well, the thing is I will agree with you that this roster is a very good Douglas Costa and a Ricky Puig who are still healthy and still playing. When you have Caligari, I think who's an amazing talent, Jalen Neal, when you have those guys, you should be a little bit better than this, but he has a contract extension. But some of these guys are playing for their futures with this team. I do think there's a lot at stake because the Chris Klein controversy, Klein getting fired, the 3 injuries, the League's Cup missing a month in the middle of the season, all those things, the supporter situation, it's all been horrible. However, if they make the playoffs, say they've overcome all of those things, the dissension in the stands, in the middle of a window when they shouldn't have been able to do anything.
By the way, Philip gave us $5 super for the whole season where the LA Galaxy had won. Was it 2017 that they went out there? But I would hope I don't get it back again. I would rather not have the piece of.
Who has it now? For some reason,
I don't know. But I remember that after it went to what I remember is correct. But yeah, it was.
So you had
that is sort of interesting here. I want to go to Galaxy. Next Saturday we'll host Chicago. So 2 chances at wins coming right out of it. RSL played very well in Leagues Cup and is the hottest team in Major League Soccer. We'll see if that continues. But is the hottest team in Major League Soccer really coming into this in league play? They were on fire whenever everything finally shut down, and they carried that over into some good games in leagues. Home to Houston, home to St. Louis, away, quote unquote, to LAFC, home to Minnesota. The one thing I'll say is the first 4 games of September, those guys get to sleep in their bed every single night, all the way through September 20th. So, yes, the games are going to be coming hot and heavy, but they get to sleep in their own beds every single night. They will be home. That is a real luxury.
And people are going to ask about St. Louis, expansion team playing very well. Why is that game in the middle there? Well, that's because that was the game that was moved to create space for the July 4th game at St. Louis. But Houston, Minnesota, Austin, Portland, those are all teams directly ahead of the Galaxy that they need to beat. These are 6-point games. 3 points you deny to your opponent and 3 points that you get. Those are teams that are directly ahead of the Galaxy that they need to win those games, to move up. A loss in any of those games, I think it's not fatal, but it hurts doubly. Again, if you talk about the the 6-point switch. If Houston were to beat the Galaxy, that puts them 3 points ahead and denies the Galaxy 3 points. So all those games are doubly important, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and that's you're seeing a lot of those, right? You are the in conference against Houston, in conference against St. Louis, in conference against LAFC, in conference against Minnesota, in conference against Austin, in conference against Portland. Do you get where we're coming from in September? It's all conference games. They're all 6-pointers. You are absolutely 100% correct. In conference away to Seattle, in conference away to Minnesota, and then finish everything up on October 21st, where the LA Galaxy will host FC Dallas.
And that could be who's staying home, and that game will be at Dignity, right?
Yes, it will.
It's a home game.
Last game, the last 10 years where they've been absolutely sucky.
Austin last year, maybe that was the first playoff game.
It seemed I don't think it was Austin. It may have been Houston again, but like it's Houston or it's Austin or mind blowing.
When San Diego comes in, does that become an automatic rival of the Galaxy?
Yeah, I mean, and California teams will probably play, I would imagine, for a California Cup of some sort, right? We're going to each team, and they have to be equal, right? None of this more, playing San Jose hit 3 times at somebody in the conference. It doesn't work out. That's two with FA Cup or not? Excuse me, with U.S. Open Cup has been leaning heavily on the LAFC LA Galaxy rivalry every chance they get. Miami and Messi is their favorite thing right now. So we'll see if maybe
the schedule crunch. Don Garber is really trying to kill the U.S. Open Cup, or at least MLS participation. And it's not going to move the needle on the Apple TV ratings, and I'm sure that would allow the lower division teams to play the top teams. Sacramento Republic come in here and beat the Galaxy either, but might become a San Diego Joe Totino. I mean, what games when the Galaxy play down there?
Man, I wonder what would happen said out loud to people, and they heard, I'm gonna go hang out in San Diego.
He Apple TV made a big mistake when they didn't.
What his appeal is, right? His appeal is that he does an announcer and could do any game he wanted to do. It's a St. Louis game. It loses its specialness that way. The Galaxy, and I think that's a difficult thing. I don't know. He's all right. I think that about does it. I don't think we need to go on forever here for a lot of this stuff. Just wonderful.
I'm worried about you, buddy.
No, you're not. The LA Galaxy are hosting what they're doing and sort of how they're trying to remember Siggy and all this, and it's been there's a whole bunch of stuff that's sort of been playing out. I think he's getting inducted into the Ring of Honor, right? And so they're going to have Siggy on many occasions, and Kurt's a real straight shooter and a really nice guy too. So just some.
Be there as well?
I don't know. I haven't heard. I would imagine, but I don't know that to be right.
And she calls the coach who wins it each year to congratulate them.
That's pretty cool.
And like I said, she's a very classy woman and well known in MLS circles, and so she makes a personal phone call to the coach each year.
30 p.m. is your start time. I think it's 7:39 is your kickoff time. So we'll get you ready for that on Thursday. Thursday night show hopefully will be streamed. Yeah, I'll be okay. If you're looking for Mr. Kevin Baxter on Twitter, it's at Jay Guesman, JGUESMAN, and of course at Galaxy Podcast. At Galaxy Podcast on Threads as well. Head on over to YouTube. We can fix whatever problem suddenly popped up with Spectrum's internet service. Kevin the Panda Baxter. I'm Josh Pato Guesman. You've been listening to Corner of the Galaxy from the box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. Have a great one, everyone.
Twitter and Instagram at Galaxy Podcast. And be sure to check out and subscribe to iTunes, Stitcher, and Facebook by searching for Corner of the Galaxy. Fans, we thank you for listening, and we ask that you be kind and courteous to your neighbors as you leave the podcast. We thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you again. Until then, I'm